All right, welcome everyone to Interconversations, which is a series of online webinars organized by the internationalization team here at the Department of Early Childhood Education at the Education University of Hong Kong. My name is Dr. Alfredo Bautista, and I am an associate professor and also associate head of the Department for Internationalization. And well, again, I'm very happy and very excited to see so many international colleagues who are joining this Interconversation today. So as many of you know, Interconversation was born during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic in our attempt to keep the international ECE community engaged and connected during those days. This initiative was actually very, very well received in the sector. So we decided to continue to organize these webinars to keep the conversation going and to keep our connections alive with colleagues in other parts of the region and also in other parts of the world. So for today's session, we have around 400 participants who have registered for the event, although not everybody is here yet, but hopefully they will join later. So many of us here from Hong Kong, also mainland China, and also many neighboring countries such as Cambodia, Philippines, Singapore, also colleagues from Australasia, and also Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. So we really have, like in other prior Interconversations, we really have colleagues from all over. Many thanks everybody for your interest and for taking the time to join us for this webinar today. So today we have invited a very good friend and a very good collaboration of our department to host and moderate in our Interconversations of today. She is Miss Betty Yau, who is a guest lecturer at our department and also the principal of Fairchild Kindergarten and acting head of school for Fairchild Junior Academy. So Betty Yau has been a very, very strong advocate for the Hong Kong and Macao Reggio Emilia study group since 2016. And she has also facilitated meetings to raise awareness and spread knowledge and share best practices on the Reggio Emilia approach to educators and parents in Hong Kong. So in fact, I have to say, Betty was the person who proposed and conceived the idea of having these Interconversations on the Reggio Emilia approach in Asia. So there's really no better choice than Betty to host and to moderate the session today. Betty, thank you so much for doing this with us. It's a pleasure to work with you in everything we do together. Now I'm going to pass the mic to you. So I will be here all the time during the session, of course, during the whole webinar, and I will come back later to close the session. So let's welcome Betty, everyone. Thank you again, Betty, for doing this for us, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you for the very warm welcome, Alfredo, and a lovely introduction. I'm really delighted to bring this webinar to you all, and it's wonderful to have all your support today, wherever you are in the world. We've been planning this along with the co-founders of the Hong Kong and Macao Reggio study group, Mabo and Rafaella, and we're really pleased to have this opportunity to share as we kick off the new school year. Now you can see from the screen that this session today is about Reggio Emilia in Asia. Now, if you're new to this philosophy, the Reggio Emilia approach is an educational philosophy that puts children at the center of education. And its mission is to cultivate children who are curious, creative, and confident, ensuring that childhood remains a place of wonder and exploration, and that a child's first memories of school are cherished ones. And we know that with time and the space and the autonomy, that children can really blossom as individuals within this philosophy. We ourselves remember, happy childhoods, and we want to use the lens of the Reggio Emilia approach to make sure that as educators, we are making those learning moments fun and engaging and fulfilling, because we really only get one childhood. Some core concepts from the Reggio Emilia approach, which you'll hear from some of the speakers tonight. One thing that we strongly believe in Reggio Emilia is that the children are very capable, and we have a very strong image of them. We also use what's called an emergent curriculum, where the ideas for learning really come directly from the children. And there are many ways for children to express themselves in what we know as the 100 languages. So using all their senses, and anything goes, of course, as long as it's safe. Through that process, teachers are partners in the children's learning, and we use documentation to make that learning visible. And of course, the community collaboration and partnership with parents is very important. So I'm really delighted that today we are very fortunate to have a very knowledgeable panel of speakers who are experts in this approach as it's practiced in their schools. And I'm going to take you on a mini tour of Asia. So in today's session, you'll see from the screen, we have our 6 speakers, and all of them have very kindly agreed to give up their time and share their knowledge with us. Now, the format will be that every speaker has around 10 minutes to do their sharing. Now, we know that's not enough, but we want to give you a flavour of what's happening in those countries. Each speaker will give a short sharing, and they're going to use these guiding questions, telling us what Reggio Emilia means in their country or their school, and also how is Reggio Emilia practiced in their area. And as Alfredo mentioned, after the 6 presentations, we'll have time for Q&A, and we'll feel free to write your questions into the chat box as we go through, and we'll try and pick those up at the end. So without further ado, time is of the essence. I would like to get started and introduce you to our first speaker. That's Miss Rafaella Tung. Here she is from Hong Kong. So we're going to start our journey in Hong Kong. Now, Rafaella is a very dedicated and experienced educator with over 2 decades of experience in this field, early childhood as well as special education. She's founded World in Motion for special needs children. She also has been a really inspiring leader of the award-winning Reggio Emilia-inspired preschool called Blooming Buds. She is the inspiration, one of the inspirations behind the Reggio Emilia study group here in Hong Kong and Macao. And she also is doing external education consultancy through her firm, Blooms and Buds. Her work is varied: consultancy, writing, lecturing, teacher training, and working with children. So I'd like to pass the time now to Rafaella. Feel free to share your screen, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. It's always nice to be introduced by one of my best friends. Okay, so first off, good morning, evening, or afternoon, wherever you're coming from. I'm so excited to be here and to share with you some of the things that I've learned as a Reggio Emilia practitioner. In addition to everything that Betty said, I'm first and foremost a mother of 3. So a lot of the stories that I will share today will come either from home or from the preschool or from the teachers that I've worked with. So as the first speaker, I really wanted to offer our international friends a bit of a condensed glimpse of Hong Kong's early childhood education landscape. So Hong Kong continues to remain culturally rich and diverse, with lots and lots of different types of schooling options. Now, the mass majority of the schools do follow the local curriculum provided by the Education Bureau. But in addition to that, others adopt like national curricula, such as the EYFS and the IB. And then again, you have the non-traditional approaches such as Montessori, the Reggio Emilia-inspired, and the Waldorf schools. But then depending on the leadership team, we all know that each person can kind of look drastically different, even if we share the same curriculum and approach. In general, the more traditional schools continue to be very teacher-centered, if you will, with an emphasis on discipline, obedience, and academic excellence. So as you can imagine, with a place that's more focused on maybe the predetermined set of knowledge, that it actually leaves very little room for individual choice and autonomy. But having said that, lots of changes are being made by the government and different school bodies. But I thought that this was a definite topic for sharing because it really needs a good nudge in the right direction. So for today's sharing, I'll be discussing the basic principle of the image of the child and how reframing our mindset can basically foster deeper connections. I love stories, and you'll see lots of that throughout my presentation, but let me share with you a personal encounter that deeply influenced what I chose to present on today. So a few years ago, I had a rather peculiar interaction with a student teacher who was visiting us at Blooming Buds. So the children were busily engaged in free play, much like the photos that you're seeing here now. And then when she thought to ask me this most curious question, and her question was, when it's free play time, do the children get to choose what they play with? So what are your thoughts? Yes, no, maybe? Well, my answer, coming from a Reggio-inspired preschool, was of course a resounding yes. by definition, right? Free play is when the children get to choose what to play, how to engage with it, who to play with and for how long. Of course, having said that, freedom within boundaries. But as you can see here, children come up with so many different ways to play with even the same materials. Now, the reason why she asked this was because during a recent observation of free play at another school, she witnessed a child kind of playing with something, and then he wanted to move on to something else. And then he asked the teacher, but then the teacher said, but you still have 10 minutes to play with this one. So like this brief encounter really highlighted for me how our mindset shapes all that we do. And if any changes are to be made, it must begin with how we view children. As they say in Reggio Emilia, children are not just citizens of the future, but rather citizens of now, just like you and me. Now, there's two main objectives I'd like to accomplish today. First, I want to inspire a bit of a shift in our mindset, especially when it comes to the image of the child. And secondly, I want to share a technique called practice the pause for your consideration. For me, both the objectives are intended to strengthen our relationships with the children and also empower us to become more reflective educators. And I believe we can do that regardless of our geographical locations. Now, this is where the Reggio Emilia inspired approach comes in. Most of us who are practitioners of this teaching philosophy can pretty much recite this, right? The image of the child who's one that's capable, competent, full of potential, active constructors of knowledge, social beings, who learn through collaborative efforts. They have the 100 languages of children, which basically mean that they have multiple ways of learning and expressing their thoughts and ideas. But then I want to share that this image of the child, even though it's quite simple and straightforward, has really evolved with me and grew with me as I've been, going on my own reflective journey. When we say that a child is capable, it's often simply understood as, we acknowledge their inherent potential. We acknowledge their skills and abilities to actively participate in their own learning and development. But then in collecting the magical moments of my own children and those that I've worked with and talking to other educators about theirs, I came to this profound realization that the word capable encompasses so much more. It means that the children have the power or the capability to show us a new way of thinking, only if we take a genuine interest in viewing the world through their perspective. So stories again, right? Let me take you back to the journey of my own image of the child through a story from home. So I remember it being a Sunday morning. I witnessed an ordinary, yet often extraordinary moment with my own daughter. The thing about Brazil is she loves playing pretend. No day goes by without her pretending to be this or that or going on her own little adventure. Well, this Sunday, shortly after waking up, I had opened all the curtains and walked off to brush my teeth, get ready for my day. But then when I got back, I noticed that all the curtains were closed again. And then she was sort of huddled up, as you can see there, underneath the curtains, and she was lying on top of a pile of pillows and blankets. And she kind of had the bedside light kind of shining on her a little bit. So right away, I thought she was camping. But instead of just stating it as a fact, I decided to ask a question. What are you doing? The thing is, she was camping, but she was building a sunset. So I often think back to that moment and how different that interaction would have been if I just said, oh, you're camping, and then kind of went on with my day. You see, children are capable. They're capable of envisioning and bringing to life beauty that we often take for granted. And then it's through this lens of the children that they really teach us to appreciate the magic in our surroundings and recover our ability to see wonder, something that I'm sure a lot of us has lost. So I'm going to give you a little challenge here. And that is, I wonder if you can think of a magical moment that inspires you. And if not, it's a good idea to start going to find one and really holding on to that. So in our practice, our mindset really provides a foundation for all that we do. And with Lawrence Malaguzzi, the founder of the Reggio Emilia approach, he once said that stand aside for a while and leave room for learning. Observe carefully what the children do. And then if you have understood well, perhaps teaching will be different from before. I love that. It is when we recognize that our position as educators is not just to teach, but to learn alongside children. Only then can we shift our approach. So far we've talked about reconceptualizing or reframing the notion of capable. Now let me share with you what we've been doing with what I like to call practice the pause. So the phrase practice the pause basically refers to being very intentional with momentarily slowing down in the classroom, taking a step back to give ourselves the space and the time to study what is happening through the children's words or their actions. reflecting on the movement and the information that's collected, and then finally responding with a sense of genuine curiosity, and so that we can then challenge new ways of thinking. I feel like it's a particularly important phrase to remember in a busy classroom when we sometimes just get caught up in the motions of, get caught up with going through the motions, right? We need to take the time to ask ourselves, why are we so busy? Who are we busy for? And taking these short moments of reflection really gives us this opportunity to notice what is really transpiring in the classrooms. And by doing so, we're consciously responding or asking questions that we genuinely want to find out the answers to. And it's only when we replace these kind of assumptions and curiosity and seek to understand the children that we're able to really challenge these very capable individuals to further their own learning. And I promise you, I've seen it time and time over again. It's a complete game changer. You practice a pause, all of a sudden a light bulb kind of goes on and teaching is like never before. So let me illustrate this further through one last story. And it shows the child's capacity to kind of navigate challenges, problem solve, and think critically, and engage with us thoughtfully when we simply practice the pause. Now, this story revolves around a student named Amelie, who had a remarkable dialogue with Miss Hannah, who's actually here today, about a camouflage snake in the snow. So it's a little snapshot, but in it, you might notice aspects of the Reggio Emilia approach. For example, the image of the child, the educator as a learning partner and guide, and the 100 languages of children. So following a visit from a wildlife educator and his menagerie of animals, the children took a particular interest to snakes. A lot of conversations took place. The children pored over books, asked their questions. And then on this particular day, the teachers had kind of set up the environment with art materials, photographs, and figurines as an invitation for the children to document their thinking. So Amelie took some chalk and she drew a circle, a curled up snake on the paper. And from there, she added lines to give it a striped pattern. But then finally, she covered over the whole piece of paper. Now, I have a feeling that at some places, children may have been stopped before getting to that point, right? After all, the snake on its own was beautifully drawn. It was a gorgeous product for display in the classroom or sending home. But instead of stopping Amelie, Miss Hannah practiced the pause and she kind of watched on. When Amelie was done, Miss Hannah asked her a question, both out of genuine curiosity and also to challenge her thinking. How will we know where he is or his pattern if it's covered in snow? Well, Amelie looked at the picture for a moment before turning it over, and bam. She then went on to draw two light lines, one above the other, leaving a gap in the middle. Between the lines, she drew a striped snake. Mind-blowing, right? And for educators to have to check those boxes, that 2-minute story I just shared about Amelie basically showed knowledge acquisition, fine motor skills, creativity and imagination, problem solving, cognitive flexibility, spatial awareness, just to name a few. And so, as I said, teaching and learning is like never before if we only learn to practice the pause. I'm mindful of the time, and as we're coming to the time together, let us reflect on this kind of profound impact of the image of the child in education. When we reframe the concept of capability, we also recognize that children are smart and expressive learners that we can also learn from. In practicing the pause, we allow ourselves to put aside these assumptions, observe more carefully, understand more deeply, and it's only really in doing so that we're able to respond with greater sensitivity. So, as we move forward as educators, let us make a pact here that, let's cultivate these deeper connections so that we can unlock endless possibilities for growth and discovery for both us and the children. Multiple ways to connect. There's like the old-fashioned way through email. Then there's LinkedIn. If you want to follow along on educational consultancy type things and what we're up to, there's the Blooms and Buds. And of course, with the Reggio Emilia study group, we post a lot of things on there as well. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Rafaella. I think that you've shared with us a very good strategy that we need to practice the pause with children. And I recently talked to my team about, we were doing some team building and we talked about the marshmallow test. There was, a very famous experiment where children were given a marshmallow. And if they could wait a certain length of time, they could have another one. The equivalent of that marshmallow test for us as adults is our digital devices. And we're just in such a busy world that we often forget to practice that pause. And I think it's interesting, particularly in Asia, in Hong Kong and China, where parents really want children to get ahead of the game. And we often forget that childhood and skills for children need time to develop. And through our Reggio Emilia lens, we really need to make sure that does happen, because for something like handwriting, you can't skip the stages. You need to build up those fine motor skills and those muscles before you're ready to hold a pen and to go through that process. And to do it any earlier doesn't work. So thank you for reminding us to practice the pause. We're going to head off from Hong Kong into Vietnam, and I would like to introduce our second speaker, who is Miss Nguyen Thanh Ha. Thanh Ha was born in 1977 in Hanoi, in Vietnam. And when she had a daughter, she looked for a good educational method. And this led her onto the pathway of the Reggio Emilia approach. And she applied for a study tour to go to the Loris Malaguzzi Center in Reggio Emilia. She then set up her own kindergarten and named it Elite Preschool. And it applies the Reggio Emilia approach based on traditional topics following the Education Ministry's curriculum. And she and her colleague have published a book about their journey with Reggio Emilia and with their observations from different countries. And Thanh Ha, a few years ago, visited us in Hong Kong. So we had a very nice connection there. I'm going to pass the time now to Thanh Ha. Over to you to share your screen, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Thanh Ha from Vietnam. I'm happy to be here to share with you about how Reggio Emilia approach reflects in my kindergarten in Vietnam. Coming back to the time I set up my kindergarten, I decided to have a method to let children deeply involved in experience. And my teachers spend more time to observe children's playing, because if following the fixed schedule, our children couldn't have enough time to connect with the children personally. Luckily, I knew about Reggio Emilia approach and registered study group in Loris Malaguzzi Center in 2018. And during the study and observation there, I learned about the values of Reggio Emilia approach, which reflect my mindset about childhood education. Like children are active protagonists in their growing processes, and children have hundreds of languages, 100 ways of thinking, expressing, understanding, and adults need to respect their languages. Children participate in the learning process to make use of their 100 languages. Learning as the process of constructor, and every child is the constructor of knowledge, competencies, and autonomy. Educational research is one of the necessary for life for children and adults. Educational documentation makes learning more visible. Educational action is shaped through designing of environment, participation, and professional growth of personnel. The organization of work, spaces, and the time of children and adults are part of values and choices of the educational process. Especially, there's one thing is difference, that environment and space can be considered as co-teacher. This is the first time I heard about that. And professional growth is the right and duty for every teacher. Children's learning process are offered by teachers to make documentation and evaluation for each child's development. The question in my head is how Reggio Emilia approach in the world. We had chance to visit some schools in Reggio Emilia city, and at the moment I felt it was amazing. But I wonder how I can bring it to Vietnam, because all the conditions like construction, culture, educational background, and facility are totally different in Vietnam. Therefore, I decided to visit more schools in other countries like Germany, Hong Kong, and Singapore. From those visits, I know that Reggio Emilia approach is very flexible. It's not a fixed program to follow. It starts based on the children's image and school's philosophy. In Vietnam, we need to follow the direction from educational ministry. We have topic for every month and divided in clearly subjects like science, literature, music and movement, arts and math. And their learning process are evaluated based on more than 100 criteria. In different fields like physical, awareness, language, emotion, and artistic. It is quite complicated for our teachers to follow. And I set up my school's philosophy is to bring equal education with rich experience for all the children, even they are not from the rich family, which can be learned in international school. So children grow up through experience and not too much academy. Finally, I combine Reggio Emilia philosophy with direction from educational ministry. So teachers don't have to face with too much stresses. We still based on monthly topic, but teachers narrow the topic and create environment to attract children to engage. Teachers step aside to observe and listen to children deeply, to give space for children's curious and creative development, and make documentation for children's learning. I would like to show you here one project conducted at my kindergarten. It's about transportation. We let all children in OSCs participate in the experience. For 2 to 3 years old, children concentrate in speaking and learning vocabulary about vehicle and color names. They can learn through real toy and recognize the shape through shadow on the wall. They also start learning how to use paint brushes as well as to develop their fine skill. For 3 to 5 years old, they join in real activity of transportation to understand about traffic lights and traffic signals. They test traffic lights on the light table to see the transference on the colored light. For 4 to 5 years old, they work in team to make a road and work in personal to design the parking place. At this age, they start to develop their skill to use pencil and draw and also discussion. For 5 to 6 years old, they involve more in society, so they have their dream for job already. So they draw from what they observe on the street about police officers. Then they also have chance to develop their teamwork very well to draw a city map around our kindergarten city. You can see even the seats on the table or sit on the floor, but they keep smiling and discussing about what they are drawing. They are very happy during their working together. Finally, we arrange exhibition and show all items to parents who cooperate with teachers during the project by sending us a lot of cartoons to let children have rich experience. Children can role play in transport participators, police officer, traffic light controller. They can stop to buy gas as well, or even be fined by police officer if they take the wrong way. Parents feel happy to hear children share about their process, their learning process. In this case, children are the artists, inventors, scientists, explorers, and constructors. During this process, teacher kids observe and listen to students to adjust, plan accordingly. When I see the city picture from our children, I have reflection related to the picture, the city map I saw in Reggio Emilia. Because when I saw this city map in Reggio Emilia, I had impression very strongly how they could work together, what they talk when they were drawing. And now I can see my happy children in their learning. I still recognize the uniqueness in each individual and the different perceptions that can be shared between the children. Teachers observe, plan, design the learning and teaching experience, organize the environment, and they are very happy. So We create opportunities for participation of children, educators, families, and community as well. And the teacher will make documentation in most appropriate ways for project. So this is totally different with what all we did normally traditionally, and everyone feel happy. Yeah, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thanh. That's very inspiring. I really liked that you've done so much research in bringing the Reggio Emilia approach into your school in Vietnam. And one of my reflections from your talk is that, just how holistic the Reggio Emilia approach is in supporting children's happy learning. And I think one thing we all believe is that the Reggio Emilia approach really supports children's all-round development, and particularly their 21st century skills. You can see the amount of collaboration, critical thinking, communication that's happening in the projects across all different areas. Thank you for your sharing. It's really nice to see how it's implemented in Vietnam. Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on from Vietnam, we're heading now to Macau. And I would like to introduce our third speaker to you, who is Dr. Annie Choi. Now, Annie was born in South Korea, and she has 20 years of international school teaching, which includes 5 years in kindergartens. And in her current role at the International School of Macau, she mentors new teachers as well as supervising student teachers in her classroom. Now, Annie completed her PhD at the University of St. Joseph's in Macau, and her dissertation was entitled Listening to Children's Ideas to Improve in Learning and Developing Higher Order Thinking Skills through Reflection and Daily Documentation. So let me invite Annie.
Thank you, Betty. Good evening. I think most of us are having evening time, but I'm so happy to know that other side of the world are also joining. And I'm very honored to share the practice of Reggio Emilia in Macau, our school, TIS Macau. And I had been attending to Hong Kong, Macau, Reggio Emilia teachers' monthly meetings before the pandemic, and we really hope to go back very soon. And tonight I want to share how our school practiced Reggio Emilia approach and my research. So TIS adopted the Reggio Emilia approach 21 years ago, and we are still the only school Reggio-inspired kindergarten in Macau. And only some local kindergartens try to use other approaches, but not Reggio Emilia. And still most of the local kindergartens are using direct teaching method and with the written assessments. That's why I wanted to listen to the children's voices more close by and have this research as well. So TIS believes that children are the capable, creative, and active learners, as Rafaella mentioned as well. And we support their growth and learning through the play-based model. Teachers listen to children's voices and support rich environments that children can explore and build the knowledge together. And we invite parents to work with their children for the learning projects and meet our high school buddies also monthly activities, because we have until high school. And teachers support children by following their interests with an emergent curriculum, and we assess children according to their performances and observation, conversation, and documentation of their learning. So TIS uses also a project-based approach and inquiry learning, and teachers follow inquiry cycle to proceed the learning projects, as you see the image of the cycle on the wall in the classroom. So children also can trace what they're doing and how much they're done or what have been doing and what is going on next. And teachers in TIS, even me too. So we improved a lot in our skills of setting a classrooms as a more like a nature-friendly and children-centered and project-based learning, and also documenting children's learning. Documentations are posted in classrooms and hallways for the small and big learning projects. CISO is the channel for us to connect with the parents, post children's work, and also communicating with them as a messenger, using messengers. So it was a great honor and great opportunity for me to practice everything I learned here and put it into real practice and develop my own way of supporting children through my PhD study. So this qualitative action research started to see if teachers can improve children's learning by listening to their voices more closer and improve their higher thinking skills by reflecting on their learning every morning from the previous day's documentation posters. The data was collected between 2 school years, 2018 to 19 whole year, and 2019 to 20, the first term. So this was joined with the 2 groups of different 4 to 5 year old students. There's also K2 level in kindergarten classroom. And different types of data were collected in a way to record the children's comments and work, and also analyze how they're doing in learning and also thinking skills. So these images show the data collected to record the children's comments about their learning. So there are daily documentation posters on the left, and graphic organizers during our discussion, children's ideas, what they are talking and thinking, and the daily reflection videos with the documentation posters, and children's voluntary reflection and observation notes from me during the learning centers, and also my comments and learning centers, some children's individual work. And these images show how to analyze the children's learning and their thinking skills. So this document is transcribed from our reflective discussion video with using the documentation poster to see, and I labeled the color-coded children's comments according to different higher thinking skills. And the learning chart on the right top, it is from each learning centers, show what kind of children's play have been changing over time. I put the different dates on. And weekly parent feedback from Google, the form, and gingerbread man chart on the left at the bottom. So children, when they cover the curriculum area, I moved from right side to the left side. So children cover that much. Still, they have the other side to cover. And the last one on the right bottom is a weekly documentation. So summary of what we have done. And I posted this one outside of the classroom. So Monday morning, parents come and see, and they reflect with their children outside the hallway. So there are higher thinking skills from cycles 1, 2, and 3. Children, mostly when they use the documentation posters, they remembered what they have been doing and understanding what others are doing it. And some they listen to and they apply, oh, maybe if they did it, I want to do this. Or sometimes they're analyzing, oh, I think that was too weak and I tried another material to make it sturdy, kind of thing. And some of them evaluating, creating. But when you see the cycle 2, it shows the red bars. When from the cycle 1, some of the good English speakers, they dominated their speaking time. So I wanted everybody speaking. So I divided into small groups, and the small group children, so everybody could talk, but they could not bring a lot of good ideas because they are limited English and they're close friends and they wanted to go back to learning center as fast as possible. So I go back to the whole group discussion. So that is the red bars. So whole group discussion as a second time, and children could bring much more diverse ideas and higher their thinking skills. And cycle 3 is with a different group. So even it was the first term of the school year with a different group, but I was more ready to organize the facilitating reflection, and children were really showing faster, have more often, they were showing the higher their thinking skills. So findings of the study shows that children engaged more actively and improved their learning when the teacher had a close observation and listened to their ideas and provided questions and supports. And they learned to use the daily documentation posters to remember, explain their work, understanding others' work, and plan for the next day's activities or improving their own work from the previous day to the next day. And they demonstrated how the thinking skills more often when they have situations to solve their problems, or they brought more in-depth conversation during the whole group discussions. And teachers' listening and support and children's use of this daily documentation and consistent reflective discussion habits practice all work together to support children's improvement in learning and development of their higher thinking skills. So deliverables can be like to support children's learning. Teachers' role was really important for the active listening and recording their work and facilitating reflections to provide them chances to think about their previous day's work, to connect and bridging to the next day's work. And documenting instruments that I developed worked very well with my student, but it may not work with the other situation or other culture or with the different numbers. And this research was limited with a small number of participants because I had the convenience sampling with only my classroom students, and children 4 to 5 years old, their demonstration of higher thinking skills was not very often. And they also had a limited English proficiency because I had like 90% of local students. And future research can focus on the groups of children in classrooms, but special group like EAL students or special needs students. And researcher also can measure from the beginning of the research how much their performance of higher thinking skills, so I can compare with the end of the research period, so they can show more improvement. So thank you so much for your listening, and I'm also happy to connect with you and answer if you have any questions about my research. And thank you again for listening and sharing. I'm so happy to share the practice in Macao. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annie. There's a question in the chat. Some of our participants would like to see a little bit more about your research. I'm really happy to hear your research and particularly your findings on higher level thinking. It made me think about, there's a YouTube video from Dr. Ken Robinson who talks about divergent thinking. And particularly the highest amount of divergent thinking is in children who are aged 3 to 4. The example that he gives is if you ask a child how many uses of a paperclip, they'll give you many more. Whereas if you ask an adult, we might only think of 10 or 20 uses, but children can easily come up with 100 different uses. So it's really interesting to tie that into how you've shared your findings. And I particularly like that reflection on documentation being a point of reflection for children. And that's why documentation is so important in our classrooms. So yeah, thank you for sharing your research with us and your findings. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are moving on from, still staying in China, we're moving from Macau and we're moving to Shenzhen. And I'd like to introduce our next speaker to you. And please welcome Miss Joanna Huang. Now, Joanna's a seasoned educational professional. I met Joanne when she came to Hong Kong earlier this year to visit our kindergarten. She's a head of kindergarten at the Hutong Early Learning Center based in Shenzhen. She's also a dedicated homeroom teacher, an administrator, and a very hands-on practitioner. She's also a strong supporter of the Reggio Emilia approach, and she really encourages young minds to explore their interests, developing their skills, and paving that pathway for lifelong learning. And a key tenet of her practice is to recognize the environment as the third teacher. So without further ado, Joanna, let me pass the time to you. Please go ahead and share your screen, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Betty. So, hello everyone. I am Joanna Huang from Shenzhen, China, and as Betty said, I work in a bilingual Reggio-inspired early learning center. And today, I would like to talk about a concept that deeply rooted in our pedagogical philosophy: environment as a third teacher. And just now, Annie has shed some light on this perspective in her sharing. And now I'm going to just dig a little bit deeper into this aspect in the following 10 minutes and talk about how we bring this philosophy into life in our early learning center in Shenzhen. So when we say environment is the children's third teacher, what do we mean? Like for me, I literally think about my role as a teacher, like what do I do in the classroom? For example, I talk to the children, I respond to their needs, I support them to develop their interests and investigations, etc. But what about environment? We also call it a teacher. So what do we expect this third teacher to do in our classroom? Yeah, sometimes I feel a little bit silly asking myself this question, but yeah, I literally think about it seriously. Like, you are the third teacher. What can you do? What can you offer? So in our classrooms, we expect environment to be interactive, to be adaptive and responsive. For example, it can converse with the children, it responds to their interests, it will challenge our learners, and it can also adapt to different needs and different ways of learning, etc. But yeah, of course, its potential isn't limited to this list. There is so much more it can offer. But like implementing this philosophy can be quite challenging. Like while it's easy to say the term, environment is the third teacher, but bringing this vision to life demands a lot of effort. So in the next few slides, I will highlight some of our pedagogical practices from our classrooms and show how we made our environment become an active teacher for our children. Now, firstly, let's talk about documentation. Just this slide, made learning visible. So as we all know, documentation is a cornerstone of the Reggio Emilia approach. It is how our environment communicates with and engage with its audience, like telling stories about our classroom to the children, to their friends, to their parents, and to other teachers in the kindergarten. And it can also reflect children's interests and inspire their exploration. Like, I'm particularly fond of this quote on documentation by Paula. It underscores that children don't just connect with their work, but they also connect with their peers' creation. Like, especially in this last sentence, Paula beautifully puts that the classroom is a place that belongs to the children. It's more than just a space for them. And on the left-hand side, I have a little clip that reflects Paula's quote. Actually, that clip is really short. It shows these two boys that... These two boys, they are exploring a maze that's documented on the wall. That maze is made by their friend. Like, even though it's not their own work, but they're still very interested. They're also still very engaged in the interaction with the documentation. So documentation really shows the communal spirit of learning. Next, I would like to talk about provocation. Like, as highlighted by some of our presenters, is how we ignite curiosity. Here are some examples of provocations from our classroom. And as you can see in these photos, the setup of provocation is not rigid. They are not just arranged in a certain way. It can be on the table, on the floor, on a shelf, or even on the wall. So on this right-hand side of the screen is like of the Japanese creator Hayao Miyazaki. Apologies if I mispronounce his name. I mean Gong Keijun. At first, I just printed two images and stick them to the cabinet door. And a few days later, this it becomes a wall full of children's creation. They just like inspired by Gong Qijun, Gong Keijun, and then they just create their own version of characters like Totoro, and they even document their own work. So, like, can you see, like, can you imagine just two images become the provocation of learning? And I think this really showcases the environment's influential role. It is always inviting and inspiring our children to explore and to create. And one more thing I would like to mention about provocation is all these provocation we set up, they do not stay static. They do not stay the same all the time. They are in a changing process. We will always like make some adjustments based on the children's needs and their growing interests. This flexibility ensures that the environment plays its role as a very engaging and responsive third teacher. And lastly, that I would like to talk about is materials. We emphasize the importance of diverse open-ended materials in our classrooms, and we adopt open-ended materials in different areas, such as role play area, construction, makerspace, atelier, etc. And if you ask me the possibilities these materials can offer, my answer is endless. They are the tools that empower our children to imagine, to design, and to recreate. And to be honest, there is a lot that I would like to talk about in regards to open-ended materials, especially loose parts. So in October, I will have a conversation, sharing with a fellow educator, Sally from Fairy Dust Teaching, and we're going to like delve deeper into this topic of about loose parts. And I will share a link as it gets closer to the date on my LinkedIn and Instagram page. Yeah, I will share the link on my platform later. This is a platform that I created to share my Reggio-inspired practices, and you can follow this account to get the most updated information. And in wrapping up, the environment as the third teacher isn't just a technique or a theory. It's a very vivid journey, and I am really grateful for this opportunity to share a piece of it with you today. And that's all for my sharing. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Joanna, for your sharing. We're looking forward to your session in October. So thank you for sharing that link. And please follow on Instagram if you can. I particularly liked that you touched on that quotation about documentation, because it shows the communal learning and the reflection, that process of evaluation. I liked also how you said provocations ignite curiosity. Now, one thing that AI will never take over the world, because what makes us as humans different is having that curiosity. So I think that's important just to emphasize that we as human beings have curiosity, and we're not ready for AI to take us over quite yet. While you're here, Joanna, just very quickly, there's a question from one of the participants about the number of children in your class. So
usually we have 16 to 20, but we won't have more than 20 children in the classroom. We have quite a few teachers in the classroom. We have 3 homeroom teachers in our classroom with 20 children at most. Yeah.
That's a really good ratio to have.
We really appreciate that.
Well, I think it's important to have that ratio, because when you want to have time with children, if you have that quality interaction, then that makes such a difference to those conversations. With children.
Yeah, exactly. And we have enough time to do all the documentation and observation in the classroom. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So it sounds like I would like to come and visit your school sometime. Just to see all your loose parts. And I liked also that you mentioned having open-ended materials, because they provide that endless opportunity. And it kind of takes us back to the roots of Reggio Emilia. It's from a very humble beginning. As many of you will know, the Reggio Emilia philosophy came around the end of the Second World War. when a group of parents came together to create a different kind of schooling for their children. So if you can imagine like the economic circumstances at that time, it was challenging. And yet the philosophy of Reggio was born out of those times. So, you know, it's not all about the all singing, all dancing toys. It's about quality, loose parts, open-ended materials, natural resources to really ignite children's interest. So thank you for that reminder. Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you, Betty.
Thank you. There's another quick question that maybe you can pick up. Is open-ended materials? So the question is, are open-ended materials suitable for 3-year-olds? What do you think, Joanna?
Yeah. Do you mean like, are they appropriate for 3-year-olds?
Yes, I think that's the question.
Yeah, exactly. Like this photo on the right top, this colorful one in the square box. These are the materials we offer to 3-year-olds. And like on the left corner, that materials is offered for 5-year-olds, and you can tell the difference. For the 3-year-olds, we sorted by colors, and then the items are a little bit bigger, and yeah, it's easier for the children to sort, and then also it's safer for them to use. So yeah, definitely we will offer like this kind of loose parts for 3-year-olds.
And then just there's a follow-up question, I think, which will probably we can maybe touch on later. But one of our participants is asking how would you assess a student's learning in your school? I noticed that.
I think we talk about this a lot. Like we do a lot of observation, and in our classroom we use the observation and documentation as assessment to support our children's learning. Then it means this assessment is always on a like ongoing process. It's not just at the end of the school year or at the end of the semester. We constantly doing it, and we constantly assessing them in order to support them, in order to better create an environment that we can support them, no matter it is literacy or fine motor skills.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very great sharing. Thank you. So moving on from Shenzhen, we are moving across the way to Japan, and I'm very honored to introduce our next speaker to you. So our next speaker is Dr. Mori. She is currently the Professor of Early Childhood Education at Kobe Shinwa University of Kobe in Japan. And her research interests are on the relationship between children's rights and the practice. She is going to share with us more about slow pedagogies and pedagogical documentation. So prior to being a professor, Dr. Mori taught in kindergartens in Japan and New York, and she served as a principal in Tokyo and Japan. She is the board director of the Japanese National Committee for OMEC. She's also a member of the Voice of Children Advisory Council of Bright Start Foundation. So Dr. Mori, over to you. Please go ahead and share your screen. I'm looking forward to seeing your slides. The time is yours.
Okay. Good evening. Well, okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Mori, and maybe I'm quite different from other, presenters, because currently I'm teaching at the university. So I'm not teaching at, teaching and learning with the children. So I probably is more, giving you more, kind of overview of what's happened in Japan and what is going to be. So that's why I put the title as Hopes and Challenges. Okay, as I was introduced, I'm currently teaching at in a university, and I'm teaching students and going to become a kindergarten or day nursery school teachers. But prior to that, I used to teach at the kindergarten, and then also at kind of like a Japanese weekend school in New York City. This is like an overview of my talk. And since the time is very limited, I have to go through like, little by little. But then in terms of giving you some example is, focusing on the atelier and then also like, the relationship with, daily, lives. I just wanted to go through why I get to know Reggio is a kind of like shock for myself because I was, student also, the lecturer at the Columbia University in New York City, and I got to know Reggio. And my first impression was, what is this? What is this in the world? Then I got to know around in the 1990s. Since then, I really, kind of working with the philosophy and also practice of Reggio Emilia. These are my, the work, and currently I'm really engaging in translating art and creativity and one city, many children. And this is my very first time to attend this seminar and also, my first presentation. So I'm pretty nervous, and I really, really, appreciate for Mr. Izumi, Makoto Izumi, and also Mabo Kawata to introduce me. And also I had a wonderful pre-meeting with the presenters. So in terms of, Japan to encounter with Reggio, it's actually, we had 3 exhibitions so far. One is in 100 languages of children, and then also on Wonder of Learning. And then from last November until last May this year, we had the exhibition of mosaic material works and marks. And unique things for the exhibition in May, actually held in March, the end of March until April, was in Osaka and Kobe. The presentation, the practice was, we were shared with the attendant, and also the workshop was held in 2 places in Kobe and in Osaka. And this was the time of the workshop. And then also, children, adults engaged in a workshop. So exhibition is not just, looking at the works of the Reggio. It's more real experience of, having a real dialogue with the, material. That was very much, inspiring and kind of like, that we really learn each other between the children and adults. So what were the message from Reggio Emilia? I just wanted to bring out the 3 things. One is image of the child, as many presenters have talked about, and also environment as third teacher, which is, important thing is that aesthetic dimension and also transparency. So the environment is not just like a static thing, always moving and always, changing. And also progettazione. Project is not like the one that the teacher decided. It's, uncertainty. We live in uncertainty is very, very important. So now I just wanted to share with the Japanese experiences for the 2 things. Since the Japanese early childhood, education and care, we will stress the importance of learning through play and also learning through environment. So then I just wanted to share with the 1-day nursery. It's called Ejiri Hoikuen. It's located in nearby Mount Fuji and facing the Pacific Ocean. The place is called Shizuoka. And the director and also one of the teacher, now he is a tourist, visited Reggio. Before the nursery was established. The nursery was established in 2015. And then, put the atelier, place the atelier in the center. But then interesting is that Well, maybe this is a kind of a, inspiring question to share with all of you, because they don't say, Reggio-inspired. This is a very contradictory thing is happening in Japan, because in some, centers, the kindergarten, claim that, as in Reggio Emilia, is a very surface level. It's not really deep inside, because Reggio Emilia is not the, like a static thing, always a way of thinking, always, way of the children as a citizen. Yeah? So that kind of the thing is that happening in this center. Let me see. Okay. So they don't say, Reggio inspired, but they're really kind of like interpreted. So they put the atelier, and atelier is always, changing, not the static. At this moment, there is a, turtle, living things inside, and also they, stress the importance of the woodworking, because the children is so amused about the way of the hammer and nails. That's how it happened. So the children wants to become a hammer, specialist. The idea is always coming from the children and teacher. And also, as I think, Joanna talked about, provocation is also important. And always seeing in the process, making, learning visible. Since the time is limited, I cannot read all of them. But, every day, put up the documentation is called Research in Atelier, and then having the dialogue with the children for the next day. And also, atelier is not, the room, disconnected with the everyday life. You can see the classroom of the 5 years old, children. Always atelier in the classrooms is, connected together. If you are interested in, they have an Instagram, so you can really reach to and see that. And the other one, I just wanted to have 1 minute so I can, that the concept of atelier is how do they do? At my, university, Kobe Shinwa, used to be the child family support center. It's like doing things like all together. But then we will transform it, as a atelier concept with, Mr. Izumi. We will help and, work together with us. And since then, many parents really transform the idea of the children. It's not, like infant is not the one who are immature, that always thinking. So what the atelier, telling us? Well, in Reggio Emilia, people saying not to specialize place, a laboratory, always, the values to the expressive, potentials and creativity, and, expressing the 100th language of the children. That means the knowledge is not limited, static, always really, exploration. Well, at this currently, we have many challenges in Japan, like hiring the children, bridges between, the preschools and in elementary. But then I think this is the time to really examine what is the meaning of the school? What is the meaning of the preschool? Why we say preschool? Reggio Emilia people said, in English it's preschool, but they don't like it because not the Scuola d'Infanzia is not the puri school. And also we have internationalization, globalization. We do have challenges. That's how we work together. Because we, believe in the 100 language of the children means in the 100 language of the teachers, 100 language of the, the adults. And then also we believe that, the practices to guarantee the light of the child. Well, this is a wonderful opportunity to share the environment and also questioning Thank you so much. This is my first visit for this seminar, and so grateful to to share with you. Thank you for listening, and thank you for sharing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mori. That was very nice sharing. And I think you covered a lot of content. I particularly liked how you share the challenges. You mentioned about hurrying children, and it relates back to Rafaella as our first speaker, talking about, taking a pause. And I think it's true when you talk about the rights of the child, the rights to play, we don't need to hurry the academics. And I think that's something that we struggle with in this part of the world. I like how you mentioned child's rights, and that Reggio Emilia approach is a way of thinking, because children are citizens, and we often forget that. So thank you for that reminder.
Thank you.
Thank you. You did a really great job. I enjoyed your sharing, and thank you for all the time you put into putting your presentation together. Well, thank you for your sharing, and we are moving on to our sixth and final speaker. It's quite nice, actually, that our next speaker, Mr. Mabo Kawata, follows Dr. Mori. Mabo's also from Japan, although he now is in Hong Kong. I first met Mabo as one of the founders of the Reggio Emilia Study Group in 2016, and he really inspires me and challenges my thinking all the time. So Mabo has his own school here in Hong Kong, Il Villaggio dei Bambini. And as I mentioned, he's one of the co-founders of the Reggio Emilia Study Group in Hong Kong and Macao. He's worked with many children and families over 19 years in lots of different ways, being a teacher, a director, a teacher trainer, and he's also a father of 3. He really believes that the most important value is that of honesty, both for children and for adults. It's important to have that honesty, sincerity, and that's how he sees the Reggio approach as a medium to do that. I think that's also a very important point. We all want to be in a world where we're authentic, and I think it's about being who we are, and I think that's very true to the Reggio Emilia philosophy. So Mabo, please get ready to share your screen. I'm going to pass the time to you. Thank you.
So hello, everybody. So thank you so much for everybody here and Mari Sensei too. And I feel like such a pressure to talk after Mari Sensei, because I think she said so many things. And anyway, today what I want to talk is one thing. I've been studying Reggio Emilia approach for over 19 years, and finally, at least I achieved until here. And that question is why art and what's art, right? I mean, when Reggio people come, then always they say, watch what children are watching, and what children are seeing, what children are hearing, what children are touching, feeling. That's the thing you should bring into your classroom, into your curriculum. And I was thinking, that's great, and that makes sense. But why art, right? In Reggio, every school has art studio. Every school has atelierista, especially art teachers there. Why do they do that much? Because I don't do that much art in my house. I don't have an art studio in my house. And I don't think anyone has really that much art in their life. I mean, as a teacher or mommy or daddy, we usually don't have that much art time. But they do so much time for art. So why do they do it? And I started watching painting. Those painters, what do they really do? And I noticed what they do is choice. They choose something. They choose colors. They choose lines. What kind of line, like wavy line, zigzag line, what kind of line they make, texture. They all choose those things and make it. So choice and action. When I was watching painting, I learned this sequence, choice and action. And then I thought about dancing. How about dance or music? Music, same thing. There's so many sounds, and you're choosing which sound to make, and you are making it. So again, it's different from colors to sound, but they're doing the same thing. Choice and action. Make choice and make action. Then how about dancing? Dancing same, right? There's so many movement, and you're choosing this movement, and you're doing it. So choice and action. And when I think about other art like sculpture or any poet, any art, I think the artist is doing is this. They are choosing and making action. Then I thought about my life. My friend Makoto-san, I talked about this topic, and he said art is life itself. And I had no idea what he's talking about. Why life is the art? What do you mean life is art itself? I didn't understand, so I kept thinking and thinking. And I realized, yeah, I didn't eat my dinner yet. I'm hungry. Then I'm going to choose what I eat. And I make action, I eat it. That's same, right? And why am I doing this job? I chose it and I made action. Why do I live in here? I chose it and I made action. This choice and action is actually, like Izumi-san, Makoto-san said, it is life itself. Then I realized this must be so important because I believe education, no matter early childhood education, but all education is a preparation for the life. Life of 50 years, 80 years, whole the life, the preparation. Then what's become most important? The practice of this sequence, choice and action, right? So I chose this photo a few days ago. Children said they want to plant something, so we went shopping for seed, and they are choosing those seeds. So choice and action, choice and action. This photo, they are looking at the map where the monkey head. They wanted to see monkey. So we went to the Kadori farm, and I said, then let's go to monkey heaven, but where is it? So they were, actually, we didn't get there yet. We tried 2 times, and still we couldn't get there because they keep lost. But those practice of choice and make action, I think this is a key for the life, whole long life. And today, when I was listening the other people's presentations, then I think the same key point. For example, loose parts. Loose part has rules. So you can choose how to use, and you can make action how to do it, right? And play, how to play, what to do, how to do, with whom to do, how long to do, where to do. That's all choice and making action. And yeah, that's my finding, and I wanted to share something. Choice and action. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mabo. You were always very inspiring. You always give me something to think about. You're right. Choice and action is very important. And, going back to what Dr. Mori talked about, we were hurrying children. It takes us back to when you're in a school, and if you provide children that choice and that time to take the action, you're giving them autonomy. I think generally Reggio Emilia schools are very good at providing that time and giving children that choice. And it relates back to child's rights. And you're right, education prepares children for life. The context of where we are in Hong Kong is that a lot of children have domestic helpers at home. My personal view is that having domestic helpers makes children quite helpless because they have so much support that sometimes they never get the opportunity to do things for themselves, put on their shoes, pack their school bag, wash up their snack boxes after the end of the day. They don't even need to go into the kitchen.
Hong Kong education, they focus is only one side, action, and
Correct.
They don't care about choice.
So you're right. That's why children need to come to school so that we can give them choice, the time, and just the autonomy to take action. And I think that's a really good message to end our presentations on tonight. Thank you very much, Mabu, for your sharing. And thank you to all our speakers who have done so much sharing tonight. I would like to take us into our question and answer time. We already have one question from one of our participants, and it was directed to Rafaella. And the question was, how do you apply the Reggio Emilia approach to special education, classrooms with children with special educational needs? Are there any examples that you can share? So Rafaella, maybe you can take the first question.
Hi. All right. First off, thank you so much for that question. I think it's such an important one to kind of tackle, especially since I'm sure, you know, across the world, we're working with lots and lots of children with special educational needs, and perhaps even more so than when I graduated. So just to give you a little context, when I graduated, children with autism was, I think, 1 to like 50 or something like that. And I think now the statistics are like 1 to 150. So it's definitely grown a lot, whether or not it comes to like assessments or, you know, just being more aware, or maybe it's like environmental factors. Having said that, I think with the Reggio Emilia approach, just like everyone said throughout the presentations, at the very heart of it is the idea that it's a very child-centered learning philosophy, right? So we really need to prioritize the needs and the interests of the children. I was thinking a little bit about this question when it popped up. And if I was to kind of break it down into all the different principles before I give you that example, it'll maybe make a little bit more sense. So for me, I do think it's very important to recognize, well, every single child is different. So what is it about this specific child that is different to them? Or what are their specific rights? And maybe it might be including their way of expression. Maybe it's like dancing, singing, or drawing. You might want to take into consideration their sensory needs. So for me, I've actually worked in a very specialized way with children with autism. A lot of them have different sensory needs. And so therefore, we also need to provide them with like the choices of expression. Maybe they don't like getting dirty. Are there other options that are available to them? And I also think in general with like the Reggio philosophy, it's quite an inclusive environment. When I went to Reggio, one thing that really struck me was that parents were included in some of these international conferences, parents of children with special needs. And it's just kind of spoken as, okay, well, they're part of us. And that's probably, you know, that's as far as it goes. They're part of us. How do we include them? I also think, especially in places like Asia, where there is, I feel in a lot of ways, much more stigmatism when it comes to special needs children, that the documentation piece of it is so important, because then we're being able to advocate for these children and show them not only just what they're lacking, right, but their abilities and their strengths. To maybe the environment as a third teacher, I do think that, you know, Dr. Mori also mentioned a little bit about this. And with the environment, what are the needs of that specific child? Maybe it's like the transitions are a bit difficult. Maybe it's about including visual schedules that work for them. I remember in my playgroup classroom or my preschool classroom, because time is such a difficult concept, right? It's like, okay, 3 minutes and then we got to do something else. Maybe it's about including visual timers or sand timers, where it's very specific to them and it works with their ways of learning. Then there's like the emergent curriculum, right? There's like group and individuals. An example I can provide for you for that is there was one time I remember specifically in kind of like a mixed age classroom where the children were really fascinated with planting. Now, as you can imagine, planting and gardening can be quite like a messy ordeal. So while the children were planting and discovering all those things, we had a child who had special needs who really wasn't into it. And how we decided to include him in the group was because he loved building. So he was more focused on helping us build like greenhouses. He was building them out of Legos. He was building them out of wooden blocks. He was building them out of cardboards. So he was still very much part of the group and part of those discussions, but he decided to express it in a very different way. Another way is, I think before you even start any of that, it's very important to kind of build those connections and have that dialogue. And a way to do that is simply to be down on their level. When I first started working with children with special needs, I think one of the misconceptions is, okay, well, like, how do you connect with them? And you can in so many various ways by practicing the pause. You know, you stop, you kind of get down to their level, see what it is that they are interested in, and try to enter their world so that they can then be interested in yours. One way that I've done that in the past is with a nonverbal little girl. Like that's like the first one that kind of pops to mind. But there was a nonverbal girl who really wasn't interested in anything that was happening. I think she was 1 turning 2 maybe in our classroom, or 2 turning 3. I remember it being a birthday where she just wasn't interested in the birthday party. She wasn't interested that everyone was there for her. But then what we did was she was interested in drawing. So she sat and she was kind of like making little marks. And we sat down with her and we just copied what she did. And as soon as we started doing that, she just looked to see what we were doing. It was one of those first moments that kind of clicked where she's like, oh, they're kind of interested in like my world as well. And from there, we were able to get a lot more language and a lot more connections. And it's definitely like a slow process, but that's where we came from it. And I think when it comes to parents and inclusion, especially if you're working in the early childhood education field, early intervention really is key. So I think it's important to then, be open to communicating and kind of connecting and collaborating with all the different therapists and bringing parents on board with all of this and being a part of that conversation and dialogue. I hope that kind of answers your question. I know there's it's quite a lot to condense in a very small thing, but I hope that helps.
Thanks a lot for sharing, Rafi. I think it's a very big topic, and maybe it's something that we can maybe come back to in the future. Let's take a look. We have a few more minutes just to look at a few more questions. There was a really nice question from one of our participants about if there was one thing you could change in your country, what would it be? Does anyone want to share one thing they would change within their country? Obviously, special needs is one thing, but in terms of the Reggio Emilia aspect within maybe Japan, or I think Dr. Mori already talked about the challenges there. What about from some of the other places we've been visiting today? And if any burning examples you can share. I think within my setting in Hong Kong, I would like to see more of a sustainability, I guess more from not just using loose parts and natural materials, but to go one step further and to just minimize things like the amount of rubbish that we throw out every day on a day-to-day basis. And also to bring in things like, real world issues to the children. We already try and connect things like inquiry-based learning, but making more of an impact in terms of things like the Sustainable Development Goals. How can we link what's happening in the classroom to a bigger context, but still, of course, in a child-appropriate way. So that's one thing I would like to change within my setting, just again to provide children a choice and take action. So that's one thing. Does anyone else want to add to that?
Okay, this is Mari, and I would like to share with all of you. Well, I think the tendency, maybe, Japan or Asia, is like, seeing the things like, kind of pessimistic. Well, I talked with the people in Reggio, and they chose, the way that more kind of like, in a positive way, So I think that's the thing. We usually trying to find the problems rather than, that the children's potentiality, and all of, the presenters talk about, the children have full of, creativity, not really teaching for the creativity. I think that, human beings are born with, creativity. That's the way, really, challenging for us to really, live with the children and like, Marble talked about, action, such a wonderful way. It's more, optimistic, one hand. That's, I would like to really, express that. How do you think?
Definitely, I agree with you, Dr. Mori. There is another question that maybe you can help us answer, the role of the artillery. Do schools in Japan have that role of the artillerista, and how is that developed?
That's really interesting question. Thank you so much. No, artillery is not popular at all. However, it's gradually, talking about, but I think also the word in the translation is something is problematic, because in English, like UK, in atelier, it's translated into studio. It's not the studio. So what we are going to do is to create, the atelier is not a static one. It's not like a Marble talks about. Atelier is not like, painting or, like, making, things. Atelier is, really the, searching and exploration of the, the space is maybe textile, maybe, ICT, or maybe, physics. So in Japan, it's kind of really developing. And Atelier, no, we don't have Atelier, rarely. So it's like a teacher is, sometimes transform into Atelier. That's, how we, the issue is how to really interpret. But I think we can learn from why, that Reggio put into, Atelier in every, the classroom, in every preschools and also on infant toddler center. But, in Reggio also, they don't have a Atelier at the infant toddler center. So in Japan is really the challenging and kind of processing. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mori. Alfredo had a very good question for us. How is the Reggio Emilia approach implemented differently in Asia compared to other Western countries? Is there anything unique about how we do it here? That's a really good question. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Do any of our presenters want to share their thoughts? What makes us unique in how we operate the Reggio Emilia approach in Asia?
Okay, I would like to share about the what is the difference, how the Reggio Emilia approach different between Asia and Europe, because like what I observed in Asia, mostly they still based on academy, and it is the traditional thinking about education. For example, like in Vietnam, when the children are 5 years old, the parents are very hurry to let them have to write and have to read everything. So I also raised the question, if they know everything, so what they can learn, what will they learn when they go to elementary school? Yeah, so the important is the teach parents and adults give the children the choice and the actions they can learn from. They can have rich experience from very young learner. Not wait until when they are 5 years old and push them read immediately. It is not the respect the rights for children. I think so. But in Europe, it is they are open and their mindset of all society is different. So the Reggio Emilia is like naturally come into their life. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to agree with you, Thanh. That's a very significant difference. Within Reggio Emilia itself, 0 to 6 early childhood care and education is funded by the local region, so it's government funded. If you think about in the rest of, particularly in Hong Kong, if you want your child to go to a Reggio Emilia or play-based setting, then you have to pay for it privately. So that's really a very significant difference. Some great questions. We're just going to wrap up on a few. There's been a few comments about professional development and limitations for us as Reggio educators. And I think there was a question directed to Dr. Choi. How does Reggio Emilia support teachers' professional development? Dr. Choi, do you have anything you'd like to respond to that?
Yeah, I only started to learn about Reggio Emilia approach when I moved to Macao. So I was using Montessori and US hardcore curriculum in American International School, and I was in Shenzhen. So I also was not sure how to do it. And, what is this? What is listening? And my coordinator just asked me, you sit back and try to listen what's happening. And so I don't do anything. Is it okay? I said, you are not doing anything, but you are listening and find out what's happening. So, those are totally changing the mindset. And when I was more curious about what's happening in their play, and I was able to create more tools that I can record their learning, as I shared a few examples in my presentation. So please go to online or offline presentations or workshops. So you see how people do it, and you can sometimes try to pretend you copy how they do it, and you can find out better ways you adjust it into your own way. So always learning from watching first, and you also share with more career people and connect this community. Hong Kong, Macao, Reggio Emilia Teachers Group is amazing, as I learned a lot from our monthly meeting as well. So always connecting is very important, and I also strongly encourage you to do that too.
Thank you very much, Dr. Choi. One final question from one of our participants about what can we do as educators to introduce the Reggio Emilia approach to parents and families who might be skeptical, and what have we done to bridge this gap? So I think maybe Rafaella might like to.
I am happy to tackle that question. I think one of the things with the Reggio Emilia approach is that it begins with dialogue, just like we've been kind of talking today. And you are so much in the power to talk to your parents as well. I think when we first started with the Reggio Emilia approach in Hong Kong, everyone was skeptical. Everyone was wondering, okay, well, how do children count? How do they learn their ABCs and all of those things? And a lot of times when you talk about, oh, it's, child-centered, the children learn through play, that in itself is a bit of a jargon word. What we understand as educators as play and how powerful that is, for the parents here, especially in Hong Kong, where it's quite academically driven, is do they waste all their time just playing in school and learning absolutely nothing? So in some ways, I've learned to kind of change the way I talk a little bit when it comes to parents. Maybe it's about, sending out workshops where it's help your children be powerful with critical thinking. And then they come in and they see all this documentation in terms of how the children really are learning all these things and problem solving. And it really opens their eyes to a different thing. And one of the ways that we've done it to really kind of bridge the gap with the school between home and school is allowing the teachers to teach the parents and empower them about practicing the pause. So we actually had families then documenting things that were happening at home through their lens as a parent to then share with us and share with other families. So I felt that that was actually quite a powerful move as well.
Thank you, Rafi. Yeah. Thank you to all the presenters for sharing tonight. I think it's been a very valuable experience, and hopefully we can look at other ways to share more in the future. So we're right on time. I'm going to pass the time back to Alfredo. Over to you.
Very good. Great. Thank you so much, Betty. Thanks so much to the 6 presenters who, in all your sharings have been really, really interesting and really very meaningful, really. There was a comment right now in the chat saying, thank you so much. We learned a lot. We should do more sharing like this. So something I would like to say, other than thanking, obviously, Betty, the 6 speakers, I would like to thank my colleagues, Sophie and Joanna, because they are the ones behind the scenes, doing a lot of the work involved in all of the coordination with the speakers, with the promotion and everything that really obviously takes quite a bit of time. So thanks so much, Sophie and Joanna, for all of your work and your help. So really appreciate what you do for the ECE department. Thanks again to everybody for spending these 2 hours with us. It's very nice to keep in touch with all of you guys. So have a very good night and see you in the next intro conversations. All right. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a very good night.